relational. But I will tell you that my entire relationship, that gift I gave myself of being selfish to improve myself, it opened up the most massive space of being selfless, of now being willing to go spend time to serve others. Okay, because one of the things I talk about in my book is that, and this is a little paradoxical, but the more I sacrifice of myself, the more of myself I find.
Welcome to the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Lamson, and what you're going to find in these episodes is just how to improve your quality of leadership just 1% at a time. We don't cover very extreme things because you'll find out that leadership is about consistency, doing the basic things great, and understanding people at the utmost ability to help them get to where they need to go. So I always have a guest on my show, and these guests are going to provide you with some of the basics that they lead by, some of the examples throughout their life, their story. And then also we cover my leadership philosophy in there as well that has helped guide me in becoming a leader as well. So again, the intent here is just for you to learn, and I hope you do. And if you do, you know what to do. Just save, share, like, or follow, anything you got to do to continue this journey. I look forward to doing more and more of these episodes. And with that being said, let's get on with today's episode. On today's episode, I'm joined by Scott Lackey. Again, he is an amazing individual. Just to highlight a couple of things he's accomplished. He's an Ironman, an author, an entrepreneur, a businessman, a father, and just some of the things we talked about, like you heard in the quick intro, is selfless before being selfish. You just have to make it happen. Gifts are the pain. And then just understanding you just have to take the steps on your journey to get to where you want to go. So it's an amazing episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I hope you guys get a chance after, if you want, to purchase his book. It's going to be a great book. I look forward to reading it. But with that being said, let's get on with the show. All right, everybody. Just like you heard in the intro, I got my man Scott here, and I'm super excited because I was telling my wife about the episode today because she usually asks who I have on the show. And when I get a request from, just from other people that hear my podcast, sometimes I'll request for people to join the show. And I've done a few of them already, and I really love them because they get me outside of my comfort zone for finding people. So Scott, when I looked over his stuff, it all made sense. That's why I reached out to him. I was just like, hey, this is an easy win for me. But I was telling my wife, I was like, yeah, it's one of those ones where I just get an email from somebody that works for somebody to help get them out there. And I look over usually the info, and it's like a 30% chance, where I'll sort of follow up based off of all the intent meets the podcast. And I was like looking at all Scott's stuff, and I was like, military, Ironman, leadership. I was like, oh, that's pretty easy, dude. So I'm always really excited for these because it's not my normal way of finding people, which is via TikTok, which I really love because I get a lot of people that reach out to me on TikTok, and I see a lot of military leadership out there. And so whenever I can find somebody that has the same concept but in a different platform is always fun. Like I said, welcome to the show, everybody. I got Scott here, and what we will do, just like on every show, is we start with the 3 H's: hometown, heroes, and hardships. And so I'll hand it over to Scott. He'll take it from there. So Scott, if you want to say anything to welcome everybody, other than that, the floor is yours.
Yes, I would like to say hello and good morning to everyone. And Manny, thanks a million for following up. And I knew it wasn't your norm, and so I was excited to get the email and excited for this conversation today, especially considering the audience and considering the topic. I mean, you and I both know that there's an endless topic list we can cover, and it's important in today's world where we are. And so I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So the 3 H's. Hometown, first of all, I was born in Jonesboro, Arkansas, the northeast corner of Arkansas. I currently live south of Atlanta, and I've actually lived a lot of places, not only because of the military, but because of my career. And I'm sure we may touch on a few of those. And hero, I actually answered this question to you before, and I wanted to make sure that it doesn't come across arrogantly, but I really don't have heroes. And, I used to in my life, and I looked up to them, and I met some of my heroes, and I ended up being disappointed, to be honest with you. And so, I mean, the challenges I've been through in my life, what I answered, or what I shared with you, and I really mean this in great humility, is that I'm trying to be a hero for myself,
Yeah.
right? I'm trying to do the things necessary to take care of my family, my wife, my son, my daughter, colleagues I work with, people I have the opportunity to speak to, and that's what's important to me is is bettering myself And yes, I enjoy other people's story, but I'm doing my best to write my story because I want to leave the tube empty when my calling arrives. And hardship. This was an easy one for me. The title of my book is Wake Up to Die Again. And that is thematically a little bit about my life. There's a good side of that and a bad side of that. And one that I picked out was one that was special to my wife and I. It was my second invention, that product called a childhood health passport. And my wife and I put our entire life savings and what we felt like was our life into that product line. It ended up growing into other products for adults and senior citizens and a financial health passport and pets. And we did well enough that a private equity firm agreed with our business plan, and and there was family involved in the business, but they agreed with the business plan and invested $3 million into the business. And I'll never forget the day that I called the bank after the wire transfer and I just asked, "What's the balance in my account?" This is back when you could call your bank, right? Uh, and it just made me cry because I had arrived, right? I had achieved an amazing dream, and my wife was there as well. But 6 months later, fate would have it differently. And the private equity firm decided that they wanted the business for themselves, and they fired me and the management team and left me with all the personal guarantees and absolutely eviscerated our life. And so that's a hardship on a whole nother level than the hardship of, accomplishments in the military or serving in Iraq or that's a whole nother level when you're left with nothing. And so that's one particular hardship. That's one chapter in the book, I might add. There are 24 chapters, but those are three things that I enjoy talking about and thankful to share with the audience.
Nice. Yeah, and I really loved how, like you said, like your hero is you, and I think that is super important. It's as a father myself, and as a person that's trying to like become the best version of myself, I am, my kids' hero, my wife's hero.
Yep.
And so it's really important for us to realize there are people out there that we can idolize and look up to and even try to mimic. But ultimately, it comes down to us, like what are we doing to be the best version of ourselves? And so that's why I think is important. Everything that I've read about you and what you've said so far just means so much for those listening to realize, like, hey, there are people you can look up to. But you still need to realize just looking up to them doesn't really like change you. Like you still have to do it.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're doing the work, if you're doing the things that inspire you, and again, it doesn't matter what it is. You don't have to do an Ironman, right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing the work that inspires you, you should be a hero to yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so important. I think a lot of people lose that is what they're doing is for them. Obviously being in the military is different, right? Like you
Yes.
saw it, I see it. Like we're technically doing things for the military, but at the same time, like you should be enjoying your job to better yourself or finding things outside of it. Like I think you did when you're in the military, and I do now that sort of keep me passionate
Yep.
outside of maybe what the military is asking me to do at those times, but they're all moving me in the direction I want to go. Like that,
Yep.
that is what's really important.
1,000%. And I love the military. I mean, and I've carried it forward, my entire life. But I loved I had great leaders in the military. The military was an enormous gift to my life. I mean, I was the guy that you could shave out of the polish on my boots. The crease would cut you in my uniform. I loved being out in the morning in the sunrise and reveille and saluting the flag. And, I love the country we live in. And all of those things were gifts in the military.
Nice. Well, yeah, let's transition down that road. Sort of like, like who is Scott? So we've talked a little bit of already, man. What's crazy? A little bit of what you've done and where you've been. Sort of take us in a quick timeline, maybe a little bit before the military, synopsis of the military, and then where you've sort of adventured after that.
Okay. I do love telling the story about how I
Hmm.
joined the army, and I'll keep it brief. But in my senior year of high school, and I should say my whole life leading up to my senior year of high school, I was a talented basketball player and a decent track runner and high jumper, long jumper, and but I just lived for the day. I didn't think about tomorrow, and I, that was just it. I don't know how else to describe it. I loved adventure, and I loved living in today, not thinking about the future. And there were people in my life, a teacher, particular teacher, and my basketball coach, and my parents really shocked me into reality of thinking about the future And these are small questions, but for me, they were big questions, which is, what are you going to do after high school? And when I began thinking about it, it actually scared me in high school because I had no clue because I just never thought about
Yeah.
it. All I cared about was living life for today. And basically it culminated with my father coming back from a business trip and telling me we were going to have a family meeting. And that was a bad thing in my family. We didn't have family meetings. And we sat down one weekend, and my mom and dad were on a couch, on one side of the living room, and I was on the other, palms sweaty. And he said, "So, Scott, your mom and I are going to present you with your three options today of what you're going to have to choose from after high school. And they're not in any particular order. And we just need you to think about it and let us know which one you pick." And of course, I'm panicking. And my dad says, "You can either go to college, number one, college number two, or college number three. You pick and let us know." And of course, it's like dun dun dun. Okay. I said, "Okay, Dad, well, I'll have to think about that." And but what that ended up happening is it just turned something upside down inside me. And then I don't know, a week and a half or so later, laying in my bed, sulking, not knowing what I want to do. And you'll remember this, I think. A commercial comes on television, helicopters in the air, tanks, soldiers marching in unison. And the commercial ends with "Join the army, be all you can be." And then there's that beautiful voice. And he said, this was back in the 80s, right? Late 80s. And in this voice, and he said, I still love it. I can still hear it. "We do more before 8 a.m. than most people do all day." And I sat up on my bed and the music's playing. And I was like, that's what I'm supposed to do. It was a lightning strike. And so a few days later, I sat down with my parents, and my dad said, "Okay, son, which college are you going to?" And I said, "Dad, I'm not going into college. I'm going in the United States Army." And there was silence in the room. You could cut it. Now, my dad was a former soldier. He served in South Korea and, of course, in the United States. And so I didn't even think about that. But my mom started tearing up, and my dad just paused and he said, "You know what, son? I think this is going to be good for you." And he was right. And of course, he turned to my mom and said he's going to be around a bunch of guys that are going to take care of him. You know, so that was how it was a profound moment in my life, a life changing event, and I loved everything about the United States Army. Well, not everything. We know the things we don't like, but the things I did like. And I think you talked about fast forward, kind of roll forward from
Yeah.
that, right? 4 years of active duty, 2 years in Europe in the Pershing Missile Unit. I spent some time with a two-star general over there, and a crazy story of how I've got there. Then back to the United States with the 1st Infantry Division, Fort Riley, Kansas, and then over to Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait in the first Gulf War with the 1st Infantry Division. So that was a quick run through my 4 years of active duty. But I had promised my mom that after my 4 years, I would go to college and get my degree. And that was important to me, by the way.
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't ready to do that in high school, but it was important for me to do that. But simultaneously with my 4 years and reenlistment uh, rapidly approaching in the desert, and everybody telling me, "Man, go grab one of those AK-47s. Let's go out here by the oil wells. This is when you do it." And it was very enticing. But something else happened in the desert, and I actually had my first invention come to me, if you will, in the desert out of necessity. And when that lightning strike happened, I knew I was not reenlisting. I was going to college, and I was going to build a business around this invention, a product I called the Wire Dog. And it was basically a product that would dig a trench, lay communication lines in the desert, and cover it back up while being towed behind a truck. And we actually built a prototype in the desert. It worked beautifully. And so that was going to be my future. That was going to be my $1 million dream of what I was going to do in college and build my career. And that was a complete disaster for a while in college. But honestly, I'm going to peanut butter spread some things here, right? I ended up getting a job in medical sales as a territory manager. That's what took me to Dallas, Texas, from graduating college in Arkansas. And that's where I met my wife and where my kids were born, actually in Flower Mound, just north of DFW Airport, and Louisville, Flower Mound area. And again, there were different seasons, entrepreneurial seasons in my life, where I had another invention after that. I mentioned it to you earlier, where that came to me and I pursued that, and that was a big disaster. But even though those events happened, I've had I like to say I lived 9 lives, right? And of those 9 lives, what I ultimately, again, where I am today, and the thing I carried forward out of the military, my favorite 3 words are make it happen, right? And make it happen is a gift that we give ourselves, but it comes with some liabilities as well. But again, all the way up to the point to where I am right now at 56 years old, right? Having done Ironmans, I'm a columnist for a newspaper where my work is published every Saturday, and I speak about the very topics that we're talking about in the newspaper. Publicly speaking, being the chief sales officer for a global company right now, all of those very things, yeah, they're all great. But if I were to sum up, that we call that the origin story, right? But if I were to sum up where I am, all of that today is that really, I'd say heavily weighted in the last 6 to 7 years, is that some of the greatest gifts have been revealed and gifted to me of focusing on myself, right? Being disciplined, having that consistency, uh, letting all of that flow through leadership with other people, and trying to support other people, finding people who are in their own dark place, getting in the foxhole with them, walking out with them, trying to be a pilgrim. That's really what I've been focused on in my writing, on my website, in the book that publishes on May the 14th, is trying to pour into other people and help them achieve some of the things that they're seeking to achieve or whatever they're struggling with. That's the stuff that gives me the greatest sense of fulfillment over the last 6 years, and making sure I take care of my wife, my son, and my daughter.
Yeah, one of the things that you hit that I really love is you just said you make it happen. And I try to tell a lot of people like similar concept. It's almost like in the exercise where is take that first step. We talked about it in doing an Ironman. It's like you just got to take that step. That right there. There's a lot of philosophies that are behind where there's a talk of don't wait for the perfect solution. You have to start with like that 60% and then adjust from there. Very similar to what you're talking about,
Yep.
where some people may delay what they're trying to do, waiting for that perfect time. And I think you've hit it already with some of the stuff you've accomplished and tried and done and tried again. Is you didn't wait for that perfect invention, right? You could have just sat back and been like, I'm going to wait till this prototype is 100% complete before I bring it out to the public. But you're like, no, dude, let's just like see what we got. Like go out. And I wrote down, I put you learn, adjust, and you learn again.
Oh
Like
yeah.
most people may just learn, adjust, and like that's where they go. But you were able to learn again, adjust again, learn again, and all of these things sort of keep you moving forward.
They do, and of course, all of those things we're talking about, they have a name, right? And that name is you're going to have to go through the pain, right?
Yeah,
And that's actually a chapter in my book. And the chapter in the book is the gifts are in the pain,
yeah,
right?
yeah. We can talk about that right now if you want. That way we can just
Swing
jump
away.
right in. Let's talk about because I love that leadership trait as well. And I can
Yep.
tie that in. But so talk about the gifts, and I think it says the gifts discovered in pain. So
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit. Open that up for some people out there.
Sure. And the way I talk about this with myself is that, and again, the realization that this is just for me. I mean, I think other people would agree with this, but every success, literally every success that I've had in my life didn't teach me anything. It was a reward, a medal around the neck, a poster on the wall, a plaque, whatever. And that all felt good. I'm not saying that's wonderful. I didn't learn anything from it. What I learned is that the gifts are in all the failures, the things that we avoid. That's just me. I know other people know this, and it's counterintuitive, but it's not counterintuitive. It's because it's through failure that we're actually learning the very things that we need to carry us forward to get to what we want, which is absolutely true in an Ironman race. If you want to be exposed, do an Ironman race. It will expose every single weakness you have physically and mentally. It'll expose all of them, right? But you don't have to do an Ironman to find that, right? The military will expose your weaknesses, right? You don't have to join the Army or the Air Force or any other armed forces to do that, right? But if you'll do something that's beyond yourself, that's where you'll discover that pain is a gift, not a weakness, because it gives you those. So how does that manifest itself in my life? It came. I'm going to manifest it the way I execute today, which is I like to ask myself, what are you willing to sacrifice, God, before I do something important? I mean, I ask this question every single day about multiple topics. Okay, if we're going to go do this, what are you willing to sacrifice?
Yeah.
Right, and that's addressing the pain coefficient, right? And, going back to the Ironman for just a moment, that was the voice that was constantly wrestling with me during the first month or so of training because I didn't tell anybody I signed up for it. And there was a reason behind it. I had so many broken promises before that. I didn't trust myself. And so it was the act of doing these baby steps like you talk about, right? The 60%, whatever number you want to put on it, right? Is that I had to reprove to myself that I could trust myself again and do the workouts and wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do the work, do the run at 6 o'clock at night when all I wanted to do was sit on the couch and relax. And so it was those were all the gifts that I gave to myself of experiencing that. I'm going to call it that psychological plane, the pain, the
Yeah.
discipline of making the hard decision and then executing it. But then on the flip side is the gift I would get when I would finish all that. And we've all felt this before. You finish the run, you finish the walk, you finish the task, and you feel so fulfilled because you didn't break the promise to yourself. And if you stack enough of those on top of each other, right? Uh, that's where you rebuild the trust, and that's where you experience it. Well, pain's not meant to harm me. What pain is really here for is to teach me the lessons I need so that I can become the person I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, and it sort of ties into my fourth leadership philosophy, which is challenge the road in front of you, get comfortable being uncomfortable, So
Yeah.
embracing the pain and uncomfortability to make progress.
And in the early stages, you don't even know what that means, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in the early, embrace the, it just sounds so wonderful.
Yeah.
But in the early stages, that's what I encourage people to do is listen, lily pads, lily pads, lily pad, right? Like you started this out, one step after the
Yeah.
other. That's
Yeah.
all you need to know, you know?
And like you've talked about, it's different for everybody. Not everybody's pain or uncomfortability
Yep.
is going to be doing an Ironman. Maybe it is just walking a mile, or writing, a chapter of a book they want to do, something that's just moving them forward or challenging them in that area. It's,
I've got one for you that nobody
yeah.
wants to talk about. How about the pain of restoring a relationship with your
Oh,
spouse?
yeah. Yep.
Or a son or a daughter or a mom or a dad. I mean, there's a lot of that happening right now where my son said something the other day about everybody's just talking to everybody,
Mm.
And I said, so I'm going to rephrase that just a little bit. Everybody's talking to people.
Yep.
There's not any conversations. So talking
Yeah.
to people and having a conversation are two different things.
There
We're
you go.
having a conversation,
Yep.
right? And so, there are so many things beyond athletics that I think your audience and I have in my life have struggled with. And I've had to go back at different points in my life and readdress those and reconcile those. And I'm thankful that I did that.
Yeah, you hit a huge topic I've been learning about recently, and that's conversation. And I love when you start learning about something, then you see it everywhere, right? It's like that floss. It's like that topic where they say, if you want a red truck, you're going to see a red truck everywhere. This
Yeah.
is where I'm at right now with conversation. I was talking to a med group commander a couple of days ago, and we were talking about a book called Cues. I think it is something about cues. They brought it up in
Yeah.
a book thing. Um, and I left there and I was telling her, I was like, hey man, like I really love this stuff. And I've been working on having conversations, not talking to people, having conversations. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, conversations are hard because they are more intentional from the
Yes.
person asking the question who needs to know they are not talking. They are having a conversation with somebody to sort of get an answer or to see how they're doing. So it's not a two-way talk. A conversation should be somebody like me is trying to either get something from somebody or open up to somebody or let somebody express themselves. So it should be I ask an important question or a great question, and that person talks, has the conversation back to me where I am not saying a lot, which is really hard for people to do.
Yeah.
It's really hard for people to not say anything and feel like to have this conversation, they have to keep talking back and forth. But I've been learning a conversation is less about me, more about the person. And so I need to sit back. So, like on a podcast, it's difficult sometimes to have a conversation because I have inputs I want to say.
Right.
But a majority of the conversation should be, from the guest who I'm learning about, people are listening to. They're not listening to me. Like I'm pretty sure you've seen this with your kids. Your kids will hear something from somebody else and they'll tell you, and you'll be like, oh, I've been telling you that for 5 years. But when they hear it from somebody else, they understand it. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's why I love having the podcast conversations because I'll have airmen come up to me and go, hey, I heard on your show this person talk about this. And I'm like, yeah, I talk about that all the time. You don't hear me,
Mhm.
but it's just the way we learn. That's why I love the word conversation. It is
Yep.
so important when you really think about what you're trying to say or get out of it.
Well, and you said something really important about how uncomfortable it is
Yeah.
when you engage in real conversation. I
It's
want to
hard.
tell you a quick story that happened not too long ago. And I had passed somebody and I just did the normal short talk of, hey, how's it going? And the response to me was, and I hate this response, he said, living the dream, and we've all heard that, right? And I don't know, for whatever reason, I just stopped and I turned around. I turned around. And I said, hey, can I ask you an honest question? This is an honest question. What does it mean for you when you say live in the dream? Would you mind? I wanted to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Would you mind just telling me? And man, the facial expression changed, and it wasn't a happy facial expression. It was like you're being rude. It's facial expression for asking me that question. And he said, what do you mean? Why are you asking me this? I said, no, it's an honest question. I just meant, you know, what does that mean for you? I mean, and he said, well, just live in the dream, dude. I said, okay. I said, well, then can I ask you one other question? He's like, shoot. I said, well, I think you meant it figuratively, but if I could ask you, like, if you really were living your dream, what would your life look like right now? I wanted to have that conversation. And the response was, listen, I don't know where that question came from, but I got other things to do. And he turned around and walked away. And man, I learned a lot from that actually, is that what's going on in that human being's life where we could not even have that conversation. I was not probing. I was asking, and I just wanted to talk and learn. They didn't like that. They didn't want to go to that, whatever that uncomfortable place was. They did not want to go there. Right. And I think that happens more than we probably realize. At least I feel that way. And when I'm trying to have conversations with other people, you hit the nail on the head. And I try to do the same thing as I try not to interject myself in the conversation. When people start telling me something that's important to them, if they're not selling me, right? Hey, how did you come up with the idea? What inspired you about it? And, how does your family feel about that? And where do you think that's going to take you? And I love those conversations. And I think a lot comes out of that, especially the human connection that happens.
Yeah. One of the books talked about in a recent episode, it's going to, I think it's just like how to say less and listen more, coaching habits or something like that.
Okay.
But it's all about asking questions, not just the normal, like, how are you? But like, if you know somebody went on a vacation, it's what did you learn from your vacation? Or like, what was your high school like when you were growing up? Not like, where did you go to high school? Like some of those basic
Yeah.
ones. And I find it now, it's harder for me to have those short walk by talks because for me, I am trying to have a conversation. So I have to like prepare myself and the person before we like cross paths, they need to know like, oh man, he's coming, like this isn't your normal, just like living the dream speak. It's going to be a
Right.
question maybe where it's like, hey, like I know them, right? So I maybe know what they're going through, right? Maybe I know they went on vacation. I'm going to be like, follow up that vacation with a
Yeah.
question of just like, hey man, how was your vacation? But what did you get out of it? Are you excited to be back? And then it's not a passing by. It's a conversation.
Yeah, when people tell me they're going on vacation, you may enjoy this. I always say this when people tell me they're going on vacation. I'll say, "Would you do me a favor?" Right, we talk about it. I'll say,
Oh
"Do me a
yeah.
favor. Send me a picture when you get
Uh,
back that I can be jealous of."
that's
Right?
cool.
And invariably, I was just talking to a guy the other day on a podcast, and he actually attempted to hike Mount Everest. And I've always wanted to go to base camp at Mount Everest, right? I have no interest in going any further than base camp, right? I just want to see it myself.
Hmm.
Anyway, I said, dude, if you don't mind, after the podcast's over with, would you send me? I said, send me a picture I could be jealous of, right? And I didn't know if he would really do it. And 30 minutes go by, and he says, "You asked, and you shall receive." And he sent me the four most beautiful pictures of what base camp really looks like. No National Geographic, from his eyes. You know what I mean? Anyway, we ended up having an email conversation about this. It was
So
great.
cool.
Yeah.
Man, I like that. That's really cool. Um, I think it's cool because it also maybe inspire you to do something you never thought you'd want to do. Like, let's say you talk to somebody about that same topic, and they're going on vacation somewhere where you've always wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so you go, hey, man, send me a picture. And it's almost like you're building like a vision board, of like all these
Yep.
vacations, and you can just compile them. And then one day you may be sitting around and be like, man, I've always wanted to do that. Oh, at least I know what it looks like now, somebody went there. And then you sort of have like what I like to call a conversation tracker where you go back and follow up with that person because you have the picture. So you can like look through it and be like, oh shoot, I didn't ask this guy how his vacation went, but he sent me the picture. So let me follow up with them after, and maybe it's a couple weeks and they learned something out there and they know you cared, right? Because you remember. So
Well, let me tell you where this conversation led. We have stayed in touch and exchanged. We found out we're kind of kindred spirits, to be honest. And he asked me, "What's the next big adventure that you have planned?" And I said, "2028. It's called the Race Across Panama. And you start with your foot in the Pacific Ocean, and you run, bike, and hike and canoe, over from the sea level across the mountains of Panama all the way to the Gulf of Mexico over 12 days." And so anyway, so you got to send that to me. And of course, I send him the link, and I get an email back. "I'm 99% in. Have you registered yet?"
oh man.
That's
Yeah.
where, again, that's where conversations are meant for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I love this discussion, because if we had more conversations, we'd find out how much we have in common with each other.
And it's just so important to build relationships, like,
Well, and it's a key part of leadership too, right?
yeah, oh yeah.
If you can't have conversations with your colleagues about what they aspire to, what they're struggling with, how they feel, what's working, what's not working, if you can't be a good listener, then that you're not in a leadership position.
Yeah. And that's why, like, I'll loop in the third philosophy for me is build relationships based off trust and care, like you're building relationships that are meaningful, not just your normal like leadership to subordinate relationships, or I bring up this military thing all the time where whenever like a new commander comes into a squadron or a unit or a battalion, right, they do like their immersions and they walk around
Right.
everywhere. And so he's like really quick. He comes in, he meets a couple airmen, says hi, what's their name, and then he walks around and you're like, oh, the boss came by and said hi. Oh my god, but that's
Yep.
usually it. There's no like relationship built. And for some of those commanders, they think they are building relationships just by doing that, which I'm like,
Right.
oh man, you're not. Like, what I would like to see is when they do that, maybe they come back,
Yep.
and they see that airman again, or they ask maybe a little more meaningful questions that we talked about instead of just like, where are you from? How long have you been in? Like, hey, tell me a story of, I don't know, like a trophy you've won or something meaningful. Because
Yep.
they'll remember those discussions a little bit more.
1,000%. Presence does not equal relationship.
That's good. Nice.
That's what you
And
were describing. They just come by
yeah,
and do the walkthrough. Just being present doesn't create a
yeah.
relationship.
And there's a lot of leaders that think that, like I've seen it on leadership calendars where they're like, I'm doing a walk around. Because like maybe they just want to get out and see the airman, but they're seeing the airman. They're not getting out to know the. And I hear
Yep.
it all the time from people where they're like, "Man, relationships are hard. It takes a lot of time." And I'm like, "Dude, duh." But it's not a
No,
lot of time at once. It can
no, it's not.
be small amounts of time consistently through 4 months, 5 months, and that's the key.
It is. When I travel with my colleagues, there's things I can do when we travel together that I can't do necessarily when we're in the office, because we have that windshield time, right?
Yeah.
But when you're able to ask people over dinner when you're traveling, "Hey, would you mind sharing with me, what can I do to better support you?" And of course, the look on their face is, "Oh my
That's
God, if I answer this question,"
a
you know what
deep
I mean?
question. Yeah.
But if you've worked with them for long enough, they'll tell you, and they say it respectfully. And 9 times out of 10, the reflection that they're giving you is, "Yeah, I think that's a fair point." You know, and if you can build that rapport with people you work with, or people that are in your leadership sphere, then when events happen where things are not going the right way, then they're going to be willing to come in your office and say, "Hey, we're moving sideways. Can we talk about it?" They're not going to be afraid of your office. That's the worst thing we can teach people, is to be afraid of our office, right? That's not leadership. And leadership is creating that sphere where people that you work with have a willingness to come to you and say, "Hey, we're not moving the right direction." We know how important that is in the military, you know, and people's lives are in our hands, and they may not, technically speaking, lives be in our hands in the business world, but their career and their future and their family, you heavily influence that and where they're going directionally. And so I love that idea that you're presenting.
Thanks. All right, let's transition over to, we'll go, even though we've already been hitting on leadership stuff, we'll make the transition. So for those listening, I always bring up my 4 leadership philosophies. And the reason I bring this up is to let people know out there, we should always have something guiding everything we do. Just like you've talked about with yours. I sort of pointed over here like I was like sitting next to you. It was really, I was like, you were watching like,
That's awesome.
but I use these leadership philosophies to guide me in everything I do. So if there's anything I'm about to take in, right, either a book I'm about to read or somewhere I'm about to go, I make sure they align with those philosophies. And if they don't, right, you just don't do it because that's how you move forward.
Right.
And so mine are lead by example in everything you do. To be selfless, you have to be selfish. And then we already covered the other two, but to build relationships based off trust and care, and then challenge right in front of you, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. So we'll go the first two out of those two for somebody listening that is hearing these. Maybe what's something they can take from it, or how could they implement it? Because, like as they come off the tongue.
Yeah. Well, tell me again, what was the first one you wanted to talk about?
Uh, Lead by example in everything you do.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's an easy one for
Mhm.
me to roll off the tongue because I'm very self aware of what I'm saying and my behavior because of the knowledge that people will always remember how you made them feel more than anything else. And I have that self awareness. I like to joke about this in my family, even with my family, right? My son, he's 25, he's a pilot, just got his PPL and just getting ready to start instrument. And I've always known this about him that when dad speaks to him, I have to speak to him at a 1 or 2 because he hears a 7, right? And maybe that's true of most fathers,
Yeah.
right? And my wife will joke with me, it's not what you're saying, it's how you say it, you know? And sometimes it's that military directness that comes
Yeah.
out, right? And and that I find to be true of leadership is it's not so much what we're saying, it's how we're saying it to those around us. And we don't have to we don't have to do we don't the more we focus on building that rapport and that relationship with individuals so we can have those open discussions. Those are the first things that come to my mind when it relates to leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'll tie the second one into what I wanted to ask you about. To be selfless, you have to be selfish. And I'll say this from personal experience. Sometimes when we prioritize big events in our life, like Ironmans or half Ironmans, people may think we're being selfish, right, with our time to train. So talk about how that selfishness allowed
Mhm.
you more time to be selfless to people around you.
Yeah, there's two answers to that. I actually had a gentleman in my life whom I have a lot of respect for say to me because he would always invite me to go play golf. And I'd say I can't because I have my long bike today or my long run
Yeah.
today. And maybe later. And this went on for months. And then one day he just kind of popped off and he said, Ironmans are a selfish sport. And I had to pause and process that for a second. And then after I processed it, I realized I know what he was saying, but unfortunately, I don't think he knew what he was saying because what he was really saying was my desire to improve myself was hurting him. That statement was more about him than he realized.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it took me a minute to catch that. And so this act of being selfish is one of the most critical things of self-improvement that we have to understand, adapt, and get used to and overcome because there are many people in your life on this journey of becoming a better human being that were never meant to go with you, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And they may choose not to go with you, and they're going to let you know
Yeah.
loudly,
Yeah.
right? And if we listen to them, when we get to that fiery middle place, when we're too far from the beginning to go back and too far away from the end to see it, when we get there, and if we start to listen to those people, that's going to be your broken promise you have to live with, not theirs,
Yeah.
right? And so being selfish, there is a very healthy selfish to becoming a better person. Again, whether it's an Ironman race or strength or whatever it is, something relational. But I will tell you that my entire relationship, that gift I gave myself of being selfish to improve myself, it opened up the most massive space of being selfless, of now being willing to go spend time to serve others. Okay, because one of the things I talk about in my book is that, and this is a little paradoxical, but the more I sacrifice of myself, the more of myself I find. Right, and you have to think about that. What does that mean? You sacrifice yourself to find more of yourself? Yeah, because it's the truth. It's because I'm getting rid of the things that don't serve me or serve others anymore. Right. And and by the way, the last thing I'll say about being selfless is that, you know, there's a saying I once heard, I once wanted to go out and change the world, and then I became wise and decided to change myself, right? And so by changing ourselves first, that's the first gift. But the ancillary gift that comes with that package is the improved relationship with your spouse, your son, your
Yeah.
daughter, your neighbors, your coworkers, that's the ancillary gift. So it's inward and out, not
Mm,
outward and then back in.
mm. That's very bold.
Let's dive into some leadership traits. And one of them you have is overcoming the enemy within.
The one we all have, that
Yeah.
voice that tells us we're stupid, you know?
Yeah. So talk about that as far as, like, how can somebody who maybe have that going on or maybe hasn't encountered it? Oh, no. Here, really quick before it's on the tip of my tongue. You talked about the more we do, the less people that follow us. And man, that is so true with anything. And I've seen it a lot where the journey I've put on myself to become better, it got so quiet.
Yeah.
And like and I think that's gonna tie into when they don't come for you. I think those tie together right there.
Yeah, they do.
It gets so quiet when you're on that journey, and I think
Yeah.
that is probably one of the biggest growths that somebody's going to have along that journey, where they're going to sit back one day and be like, "Man, it's quiet."
Yeah.
But when it's quiet, they sort of realize those that are still there are super important
That's
because
right.
they will talk to you and help you when you need it. I think that's what I've noticed as well. Some of those people that have fallen off, I'm sort of like, they just weren't meant to be there. And the ones that are like there, right, hanging on or pushing me, or they're usually pushing me and motivating me.
Yeah.
They know when I'm in it to let me do it, but then they're there like just in case I start to slip, to not like catch me, but like
Yeah,
give
hey
me a
man, check
little
yourself.
push. Yeah.
Yeah, check yourself. Yeah. No, and those are the gifts we want. I actually was just sharing with someone recently that because they asked the question of me is, Scott, how do I know the difference between the people that are not supposed to go with me and the ones that are supposed to? How do I know the difference? And I said,
Yeah.
oh, love that question. Here's what I do is that first of all, I think it's spiritual, right? In other words, you know, I don't care if you're in the military or civilian, when you're around people that don't believe in living to a higher standard because they finished the day doing this, right? We know. But then there's other people that we look at how they embody the actions, the behavior, and we see that, they may not have it all together, but they're trying. We know the difference. I don't have to tell people, you know the difference and you know which category you're in. But the filter that I use is I like to use this filter. I call it right. The look for the people that produce fruit. Okay. What fruit, Scott? What are we producing here? Well, it's the fruits of the spirit. Who's producing love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control? Who's exuding those things? You find those people, you're going to find people that are fighting the fight because it's the fight that produces the fruit. Okay? It's not the other way around. Right? It's like saying, how do I find happiness? Do I chase it? No. You chase happiness, you'll find none of it. Happiness rests in the place you're unwilling to go. Okay? So, that is a roundabout way, I think, to coming back to what you were talking about, but that's what I think you have to focus on.
Yeah, that's good. All right, we'll go back to the enemy within. That like I've heard it on podcasts. It's the inner bitch voice. That we talk
Yeah.
about sometimes.
Yep.
Other expressions for it. How can somebody control that? Like, what do you got for them out there to like help them? Like, once they hear it, like, what do they?
Yeah. I'm glad you used the word control because my personal feeling is that we don't control the voice, right? Because if we did control it, we would turn it off,
Yeah,
right?
that'd
I
be
think
nice.
that's a fair statement, right? If we would turn it off. So I think what I'm going to say is probably counterintuitive. I've heard other people say, I just don't listen to it, and I'm like, yeah, come on now, right?
Mhm.
It's in your head. We all hear it.
Yeah.
So I think I don't want to say my way. I'm just going to tell you, I'm just going to speak to what I do. And what I specifically do is the opposite is I actually listen to the voice because here in my discovery in listening to the voice is what is it you're trying to prevent me from doing? Okay. What you keep telling me, I can sleep in this morning. Okay. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. What is it that I need from this extra? So I'll just start asking the questions and I'll get my little journal out and I'll start writing my question and my answer down. Okay. And I'll write, I don't care if I have to write until the ink pen runs out, but I want to know what is it that what is so important that I'm doing that you want me to stop? So I start asking questions back, right? And what I ultimately find out through this Q&A session, okay, is that somebody's lying. That's what I usually find out. And when I find out who's lying, and by the way, I've caught myself in these little lies, okay, where I've been lying to myself, and through this conversation about, oh, I need to take a 3-degree course correction here. So running from it, ignoring it, not addressing it, all of that stuff, I don't find any effectiveness in it. So my comment to the listener is the voice that you have in your head, find a quiet place, get a pen or pencil out, and start having a conversation. That's the very first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is try to identify what it is that you're doing, that you're trying to be talked out of, because that's very important, right? Because I said this before to some people on a podcast that generally speaking, the very thing that you're running from is the very thing you need to turn around and fix. You can't outrun yourself. So I hope that thought process is encouraging to people. But man, be prepared to tell yourself the truth, because if you just sit there and lie to yourself, I'm all this, I'm all that, I'm good. No, you're not. You're broken. We're all broken, right? We're trying to fix it, and that's okay. But the sooner you address it, the sooner you address that voice, it is so freeing. It doesn't have weight over you anymore. So I hope that helps.
That makes me think of how I talk to it. Like I do talk because I know, like you said, it's trying to stop me from something. But sometimes what I'll do is when I'm talking, I'm waiting to see if it's going to continue. Most of the time, if I wait, it's going to stop, because the thing it's telling me to stop doing is already over. And I usually, obviously, since we've done this training stuff so much, we've probably had it so many times when we're running or training where it's just like, hey, dude, like my knee's starting to hurt right now, or it's telling you your knee's starting to hurt, you should slow up or you should slow down. And I'll listen to it for a little bit and think like, why do you say that? But then like as soon as I say it, it stops hurting, because the mind knows like, dang it, he's still going. Shoot, let's try to throw another curveball at him. Like
I literally write a story. I journaled a story. I was doing a track workout. My coach had given me, and I was doing a track work. It's only supposed to be 5 miles, and I woke up with that voice telling me and endlessly, incessantly about all the reasons I did not need to go work out. And I didn't respond. I didn't have the conversation. I just tried to ignore it. And it was in my head, in my head, in my head. And we finally got to the track. And I verbally said in the darkness that morning, you better shut up or I'm going to run you till you're puke. And it just kept needling me. And I started running. And so I got to the end of my 5-mile workout. And the voice said, okay, you can stop now. And that's when I said in my head, no, we're not stopping now, because I'm not done. And I ended up running 3 more miles. And I document this in a journal. And it made its way into my book. That whole story made its way into the book of this entire conversation that I captured within 30 minutes of the run in granular detail about what goes through our minds. Sometimes you ignore it, but eventually you're going to have to address this, and it comes in different places,
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people out there talking about the enemy within, and that is a real thing. And you can think you're locking it in a cage, but the voice is always going to be there. And so you need to learn and teach yourself how to deal with that.
Yeah, it's really important. Man, that's good. So for the last few minutes here, what we'll do is we'll transition. So we hit overcoming the enemy within, the gifts discovered in pain. When they don't come with you or for you, we talk about that one, the military. Man, we hit a lot of good ones. I got so many marked clips, which is going to be phenomenal. But we transition into the last phase, which is the book review. I'm going to do mine first. That way we'll leave it for you to close it out and hit all the topics of yours. Because I always bring one as well. And the one I'm reading right now is the 4-Hour Work Week. When I go to Barnes & Noble, man, I always just find a bunch of random books there. And I hate going there. That's like my kryptonite. But The title is really good. I'm only a couple pages into it, but the reason I chose this book is I always try to find a book that has actionable items I can take out of it, right?
Yep.
So that's why that book is there. And I find it really interesting because I have developed a productive work schedule at work where I don't have to be busy for 8 hours.
Right.
I am productive for like the first hour of my day with my schedule of how I check emails, how I send my emails, how I do my calendar updates. And so a lot of people, when they look at my life on social media that they see, they may only think I just exercise all day, right? Or
Right.
do podcasts or reels. And I go, no, that's just because I'm very productive at controlling the time of my day to where when I'm at work, that 4 hour work week, like maybe it's a little bit more for me because I'm still learning, but it means a lot to me when I can tell people like, dude, I don't have to sit at the office for 8 hours. I can
That's
sit there
right.
for 3 and probably do more than most people can in 8 because they're distracted by trying to do so many things that you can't focus on one. I do a lot of simple things really well. And just like you, I'm pretty sure we've learned and read you can't multitask, you can't do more things at once. We
That's
just
right.
do these small check marks throughout the day where it's just like, I'm going to check my emails. That's it for 5 minutes. I'm going to do this and do that. So that's how I try to find those actionable books.
No, I love that, and you remind me of right the very popular words today. One of popular words today is right discipline, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
I love to say that discipline is equal to consistency,
Yeah.
right?
You just
And then
wrote
there's
that somewhere
another,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's another third word I like to tag on there, and you just mentioned it, right? Which is consistency is equal to execution. And I love the
Yeah.
word execution because execution, the non-fancy definition of that, is the art of getting things done.
And because you can be consistent in things that aren't executable or good, which I
100.
just started hearing. I made a TikTok on it. I said, hey guys, a lot of you complain about not being able to be consistent in the gym, but you're being consistent at other things like drinking those energy
100%.
drinks or watching those movies. And so now, whenever I hear consistency, I always follow up with the execution part like, what
Yep,
are you actually consistent in? Are you
that's
consistently
right.
sleeping in? And they're
Yep,
like, yeah. Well, why don't you consistently get up early?
yep. No,
Everybody's consistent. So like consistency is a very tough word, but if you follow it up with what
execution.
execution.
Yeah. And I appreciate the book example because my book publishes on May the 14th. So we're just days away now. And the title of the book is Wake Up to Die Again. And here's the cover. You see the cover?
Nice. That's good.
Yep. And the actual, the retired now, but the legendary voice of Ironman, Mike Riley, is the one who wrote the foreword to my book.
Oh, nice.
And there's two sides of Wake Up to Die Again, and we've talked about it today. There's one side we all know people, and maybe we were one of them at one point in our life, where we wake up every day just to die again. We're miserable, we're lost, we don't know where we're going. And I've been through phases like that in my life where I just woke up every day to die again, right? Seasons, as we like to say. But I am definitely on the other side of that curve where waking up to die again is a gift for me, right? The thankfulness of waking up in the morning with another breath that I get to see my wife, my son, and my daughter, right? The gratitude of being able to help other people, that selfless service that fulfills me. Going back to that statement, the more I sacrifice of myself, the more of myself I find. That's what waking up to die again looks like in my life. So I think your listeners, and including I'm going to make sure I get a copy in your
Yeah.
hands, Manny, is that your listeners, this is not ever going to be a book that is the 7 steps to how to solve whatever you're challenged with. Life's not an algorithm. But what it is going to do is that story I told about the childhood health passport. We actually dig into how I joined the military, but we get into the specifics of the military. It is a story. I think it's a beautiful story arc of lived experiences that every single reader is going to see their life in my story, but it'll be their facts, right? And it will help answer in greater depth, I believe, a lot of the questions that you and I've talked about today. And so that's the gift that I've given myself, reliving all of those things in the form of a book. And I'm excited to launch that. And who knows, maybe after you've had a chance to look at it, we may be doing another podcast on waking up to die again.
Yeah, for sure. For people who may be thinking about writing a book, couple quick tips do you have?
Yeah. No, I can be very transparent about this, is that if you want to, anybody can write a book, by the way, anybody.
Yeah.
But if you want to write a good book, I'm going to steal a Stephen King saying that I actually stole, right? If you want to write a good book, you need to remember the pain, right? Because that's where the stories are. You need to be willing to be transparent. You need to be willing to be authentic. You need to be willing to share your lived experience. Nobody, I shouldn't say nobody. The best books are not books where you write about somebody else's story and then you tell us what to think about it. I'll think for myself. I want to hear your story. I want to know your origin. I want to know what you're struggling with. I want to know who you are at 2:00 in the morning. I want to know what broke you and rebuilt you. That's the story I want to hear, with authenticity, with transparency. That's what I want to hear about you. And everybody has a story to tell.
Yeah,
So
so
if
true.
if you're going to write a book, be true to yourself. Don't worry about what the world says. I'll say one last thing. When I started writing the book, the enemy within wanted to visit with me and wanted to say, "Hey, Scott, hey man, just got to tell you, nobody's going to care about what you're writing about. Nobody cares." And I carried that for a little while as I was writing, but I kept writing, and that voice kept coming back. And eventually one day I said, just like I told you I would, I turned around. I said, "Tell me again, who's not going to care? Let's talk about this." And at the end of that conversation, I ended with, "Huh, I know the answer now. You're wrong. I'm going to care." And that's all that matters. So when you write your book, right, write it for yourself first and give the gift to everybody else second.
No, that means a lot, because I think every time I open my book, Word document I have with all my little stories, it's talking really loud, and it stops me a lot. So it's always
Nope.
good. It's good to hear, hey man, just and I wrote down your notes. Remember the pain, share it. And one of the things I was going to say that I forgot that came back was some of the best books I've read, probably just like you, is people sharing their story.
That's right.
And sometimes I say we, but it's me. I overcomplicate what I think I want people to read. When in
Yep.
reality, I need to think of what I like to read, and it's that. It's that
Yeah.
right there. It's like I'll read a book and be like, "Dang, it wasn't a 7-step process to leadership. It was this guy, like the Mission Men and Me, or Turn the Ship Around. All those ones. This guy just telling some stories in his life that had a couple leadership facts pulled from it that I can apply."
Yeah. Well, here's some other practical advice. Get a coach, right? I had a coach,
Okay.
and getting a coach will get you out of your head, right? That's very, very effective. And then another thing is just write. This is what my coach told me.
Yeah.
"Hey, Scott, you can ask me all the questions you want, but when you get done, I need you to go back to writing." "Well, I don't know what to write about." "Yeah, you do. I need you to," he would tell me, "I need you to vomit on the page. Just do it. Don't worry about, am I making sense? Don't worry about, does the story tie into the next story? Don't think about that. I need you to get it out of your head." And let me tell you, if you went and read today the vomit of where I started, okay, I did. I trusted him as a coach, and I just vomited everywhere, right? And then we went back together, and then we started pulling the golden nuggets out. And then you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but guess what? Here, I have to say this. It was failure, fix, failure,
Yeah.
fix, failure, fix, editor, failure, fix. This tennis match, and at a really high level, that's writing a book. But be prepared to put the work in. And Manny, if you do find yourself struggling at that, let's stay in touch by email. I have some other things I could share with you that would help you out.
That's perfect. With that being said, and do you have any last parting shots before we hit end and get on with the day? Is there anything you think we missed?
Didn't miss anything, but I would like to tell everybody, whatever you're struggling with, give yourself some grace. Okay. You can get to the other side of you, but give yourself some grace, give yourself some room to work. And Manny, thanks a million for letting me come on and talk to your audience.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate it. And just like you said before, we will have another one, and I always love that, because I tell a lot of people, man, I always feel bad when I end an episode because there's so much more, but that's the great thing about podcasting, man. We can just do another one.
That's exactly right. That's exactly.
So for those listening that listen, thank you. Again, then we will continue to do this, continue to share everyone's story, because we all have one.